You look good. And go ahead and give me your intro.
Okay, my name is Jessica Ligon, and we're at Billinghurst Middle School. This is a 7th grade classroom, and today's lesson focused on the percent of change that students are applying to deepen their knowledge of ratios and proportions and how we use percents in the real world.
Good. Okay, so first question. We want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. First question is, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge, what was taught before the lesson, and what will come after it?
Okay. So this lesson followed, it's the end of a unit that has been focusing on the students' understanding of ratios and proportions, how those ratios and proportions connect to percent, and how we use percent in our everyday life to solve problems, to calculate discounts and to calculate sales tax and tips, and now focusing on being able to describe how numbers change and how we can describe that change using a percent value instead of just the difference between the two numbers.
Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
So the standard cluster that we're focusing on is the 7th grade standard of ratio and proportions. The students are expected to be able to relate using a ratio or using a proportion to any sort of application that would involve that kind of thinking. We have focused on using unit rate to describe, I don't know what I was saying, sorry. Do you care where I just pick up?
Do you want to take it from
do you want to just start from the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. Standards or cluster. It's so hard to talk about what you're doing.
Right.
Okay. So the standard that we're focusing on for this lesson is the standard that involves the ratios and proportions for 7th grade, specifically standard 2 in the ratio proportion category. The students are focusing on using percent to describe increase or to describe decrease within two numbers. It's related back to their unit on percents and using those percents to be able to apply any sort of real world application.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know.
That's fine. Okay, so we can make something between the two.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. And then the next one's going to be, which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified? And how did you plan for this?
Okay.
Do you need a minute?
I think I'm okay. I just have to remember what number I'm looking at. Okay, so this lesson focuses specifically on core action 2, which is asking students to represent one of the areas of that is to ask students to represent their thinking in not just using a mnemonic device or an algorithm or a shortcut. So this lesson I planned specifically for having the students model out what is actually being changed within their values. And so they were able to see where the percent of increase or the percent of decrease is coming and be able to describe that change, not just through, the fraction works out to be this percentage, but because in this picture we can see that it is, the change is being modeled through however much it compares back to the original. So I specifically started this lesson with them being able to actually draw out the percent of change and use that to describe how what they're seeing, instead of just saying, here's the formula for percent of change, now let's just practice.
Okay. We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your classroom. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
So this lesson, one of the shifts that is sort of ringing true in my classroom is the kids' ability to explain or provide reasoning for what they're learning. And that sort of ties into the idea of rigor, that the students have not only fluency, but that they also understand the concept and that they can explain it and use that in a real world situation. So in this classroom, with this lesson and in general, my students have been asked to explain their thinking, give justification for why they are doing what they're doing. That's been pretty hard for a lot of students to be able to do that when they're being asked to model something or explain why they did what they did. This group of students, especially because they are the advanced placement track, I guess, for what we have, their ability to calculate numbers is something that is very easy for them. So, but being able to go back and explain it or put it into a concrete version is something that is a little more difficult. So that's one of the shifts that I've really been focusing on this year in my class.
How did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
Prior to, again, focusing on those levels of rigor, I would have just presented the formula for finding percent of change and then had the students practice just crunching numbers. That is still present in these lessons. We didn't finish getting to it today, but we will finish getting to how do you actually use the math to calculate out what we're working on. But what is different is that I would never have asked them before to model what that percent of change looks like.
Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensured that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. First question is, how did the students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics of the lesson, and how did you know?
The students, I think that they started to handle this lesson pretty well. I know that as we went through the examples of what percent increase is and what percent decrease is, that the students were able to give justification for how they knew whether one was one type or the other. I also, when we started calculating out the actual percent of change, when we were describing it with an actual number, the students were able to make an assumption about whether or not they thought it was a certain percent or increase, and then hearing other students thinking about the same thing, they were able to either change their answer or to solidify what their original thinking was. However, I do know, as we started in with the second example, there are students who are still unsure of that idea that percent can be more than 100%. So when we continue our lesson, we will make sure to discuss the idea of what is more than 100% and what would that look like if you were looking at a model of that.
Explain how you differentiated in the lesson. Did all students have the opportunity to work on grade level content? If not all students had this opportunity, please explain why.
So the students in this class all worked on the same problems, and so there wasn't differentiation in the way that there weren't levels of different types of problems, but all students were asked to differentiate their thinking about the problem. The students were able to share their thinking about what was being asked of them, and they were asked to rephrase or revoice their thinking so that everybody could make sense of it, hearing it in different ways.
Which behaviors from core action 3 did the students exemplify, and what actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
I think the students exemplified the expectation that we are justifying our thinking with reasons from either something that's mathematically true, or going back to prior knowledge and being able to relate what they've already learned to something new that they're learning. Or today in our class, they even were able to relate it from a text that they were reading. And then the students are also given the opportunity to sort of build on each other's ideas through those justifications, which makes them all it gives them value for what their thinking is, and it helps other students hear it in different ways.
Would you like to comment on any of the submitted student work? Was there something that delighted you or surprised you with the work today?
Let's see. So the students, the work that they produced, I was thrilled to hear them talk in terms of what they were seeing. One of the areas I know that the students have trouble with is the idea of what does 100% increase look like? What does more than 100% increase look like? So it was great for me to see them relating that what 100% actually is, that's an original value, and that is something that this group has struggled with, being able to identify what 100% represents as a number. So when they were talking about that today in reference to how the value had changed, that was something that I was pleased with.
Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
This is a hard one to say, like right off the cuff, you're like, ooh. So thinking about the lesson, I think that what went well was the students' ability to use their models, use their drawings to justify or to, in their mind, be able to see what percent of increase or percent of decrease looks like. That, for many students, is an abstract concept. So the ability to solidify it and to have them have something to look at to be able to justify where their information is coming from was a pretty positive thing. And with continuing this lesson, which is going to need to happen, I think that I would definitely make sure that they are always reverting back to those models to understand the abstract concept of what percent increase is. How does, especially ones that are more than 100% or less than 100%, or excuse me, more than 100% or 100% exactly. I did not anticipate that it would take as much time as it did to draw out that thinking. So I think that in the next round, maybe some more planning for better questions to lead them in the direction that I would want to go might help. And definitely more time for them to practice is necessary.
Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
Not really.
You can say that.
Yeah.
Were they quieter than normal? Or?
Yeah, I can say that. The this class is a particularly talkative class, and so one of the student behaviors that I was surprised with is that they were quiet, more quiet than normal. I actually had set up the supply arrangement a little different because this class tends to like to play with highlighters and calculators and those kinds of things. So I anticipated that would be the case. What I didn't anticipate is that their willingness to really get involved and talk was not as much as maybe some of my other classes.
You're done. Yay!